Most people recognize that the Enlightenment is really a way to just congratulate yourself that you're smart in reference to what they used to call the Middle Ages. The movement of the Enlightenment can be encapsulated in something by a German philosopher, Immanuel Kant, where he said the Enlightenment is encapsulated in the idea of daring to know. Basically what he said is that the world at one point was the kind of world where we were kind of like intellectual children and we needed the parenting of things like religion and traditions and things like that. But we're coming into this time now after these movements where we can really think for ourselves, where if we marshal reason and science and all the stuff that we've learned and we've known, we can create the future that we want if we will dare to think for ourselves. What these movements did essentially was totally change the way people thought about how they lived in the world. Now if you move forward, one of the things to recognize is that everybody has what you might call a worldview or a world life view, that is a way you see the world. And if you have a fairly complete view of what the world is like, your worldview will answer at least these 4 questions. The question of origin, where did I come from? The question of destiny, where am I going? The question of meaning, what does my life mean? What am I here for? And the question of morality, how should I live while I'm here? What does a good life look like, right? In the 1840s and 1880s, of course there's tons of people writing, but there were 4 people whose writings that really changed the way people thought about answering these questions. When Charles Darwin wrote Origin of Species and his other writings, as those became more understood and more available and more accepted, people understood that there was a different way to understand origins than that just God created us. There was another way to think about it. Maybe we came about through descent with modification, through biological evolution.
In the beginning, it was just a simple idea.
Mr. Darwin, your theory is hugely powerful.
But it would test his faith.
It changes everything. Suppose everyone stopped believing that God had any sort of plan for us.
The whole world.
Clearly the Almighty can no longer claim to have authored every species in under a week. You've killed God, sir.
My title will be On the Origin of Species. I shall keep God out of it.
Marx gave a different picture of the future, a future of a classless society in which everybody owned similar things, and we wouldn't be of these different classes fighting against each other and trying to dominate each other.
Nice to meet you. Zunela owns foundries. He employs many workers, including children.
Child labor in factories. But we've no choice. Without child labor, we price ourselves out of the market.
And where would a society without exploitation leave people like you? You would have to work too.
Wouldn't that be horrible?
Son révolte contre l'ordre.
Marxism is anti-God. Karl Marx hated Christianity, which he saw as a source of oppression. To him, religion was the opium of the people. For communism to succeed, loyalty to the church had to be replaced by loyalty to the state. On one occasion, he described the church as medieval mildew that had to be scraped away.
Freud brought about this idea of the inner mind and the inner person, and if you understood what psychology would teach, then you could completely understand differently what you are as a human being, what you're here for, what you're capable of.
Ich bin ein Haus. In mir ist es dunkel. Mein Bewusstsein ist ein einsames Licht. Alles andere liegt im Schatten und alles, was darin wohnt. Es ist da. Es lebt. Verbotene Gedanken, Erinnerungen, die wir nicht im Licht sehen wollen. Sie machen uns Angst. Sie machen uns krank. Sie machen uns hysterisch.
And Nietzsche basically made the argument that if all this other stuff is true, the way we've traditionally looked at morality is totally different.
It's not no God, just God is dead.
Who said that?
Nietzsche. He's a 19th century philosopher from Germany.
Nietzsche was a chauvinist pig who was in love with his sister.
After Nietzsche died, his sister inherited his estate, edited his work, and published The Will to Power, promoting an early version of the misinterpreted might makes right Nietzsche. The sister's husband was a famous anti-Semite, and he managed to sneak in some of his views, despite the fact that during his lifetime, Nietzsche wrote his sister and her husband cease and desist letters, so Nietzsche was definitively anti-Semitic. But all all that didn't matter when the Nazis co-opted some of Nietzsche's writing, paraphrasing him and taking him out of context. The most common thing people get wrong about Nietzsche is the master versus slave concept. It's true, master and slave are terms that Nietzsche uses. They come from his book On the Genealogy of Morals. In Essay 1, Nietzsche tells us a story about how our Judeo-Christian ethics came into being. You know, the meek shall inherit the earth, self-sacrifice is good, and greed and pride are evil, that kind of stuff.
How blessed are those of gentle spirit! They shall have the earth for their possession.
Nietzsche believed that we can use the sophisticated introspection that we have learned from slave morality to advance beyond both types of morality, to advance beyond moral systems altogether. In fact, the main point of Nietzsche's story is to show that it's possible to come up with an account of our ethics that doesn't necessarily come from God or some kind of objective standard.
Good idea, O Lord. Of course it's a good idea.
Nietzsche believed that true freedom requires deep introspection and psychological experimentation. We need to test out ways of living to see what works for us. And he suggested from his own experimentation that being egotistical and mean-spirited doesn't really work to make us happier or healthier.
Moral concepts of good and evil and right and wrong don't hold for the intellectually superior. But you've given my words a meaning that I never dreamed of. And you've tried to twist them into a cold, logical excuse for your ugly murder.
And as far as Nietzsche is concerned, that's not true freedom.
As this was happening, as you approach the 20th century, particularly in Europe, there was the development of something called higher criticism, which was a way of academically writing and thinking about the Bible that tended to say, we're sitting in position to criticize the Bible, rather than before that people using the Bible to criticize us. Like you would go to the Bible and the Bible would say things about us and we go, oh yeah, I'm a sinner, or I should live this way, or God is this way. And so the Bible sat in criticism of humanity and we would respond to it with faith. Higher criticism reversed that role and said, no, we're scientific people. The Bible is something we can study, we'll study it. And that tends to demystify and make the Bible something we judge rather than it judges us. It's a very different perspective.